The holidays should bring warmth, laughter, and the smell of fresh pie. But for many seniors, they quietly stir something heavier. Most don't realize they're holding on to decades of emotional clutter disguised as keepsakes. Every ornament, unopened gift, or faded card holds a story, but sometimes, those stories weigh us down more than they lift us up. Picture this. You open your garage to find bins stacked to the ceiling, boxes labeled Christmas 1989, or for later. You tell yourself you'll sort them someday, but someday never comes. And with each year, that clutter quietly steals a bit of your holiday joy. But here's the beautiful twist: letting go doesn't mean forgetting. It means creating space for new laughter, easier mornings, and peaceful gatherings. By the end of this video, you'll discover what to release and how to reclaim calm this season. Before we go on, don't just hit that new hype button and help our wise aging seniors family grow. Meet Meryl Dane, a 67-year-old retired librarian from Oregon whose home feels like a storybook built from decades of love and gentle chaos. The walls are lined with family photos, yellowed at the edges, and her shelves overflow with trinkets, old teacups, and ornaments that have survived more Christmases than she can count. Each piece whispers a memory: her son's first paper snowflake, her late husband's favorite mug, a cracked angel figurine from the year her daughter moved away. To Meryl, these things aren't clutter, they're proof of a life fully lived. But last Christmas something shifted. She climbed into the attic and found 10 boxes labeled holiday, stacked in neat rows, waiting. As she reached for the first box, she felt something tighten in her chest. Unpacking felt heavier than the boxes themselves. She realized she'd been spending her golden years managing the past instead of making space for small, ordinary joys. This year she resolved to do things differently: declutter before the first string of lights goes up, keep what sparks real comfort, and release what anchors her to duty rather than delight. Her decision was gentle but firm, not erasing memory, but clearing room for presence. With each release she felt lighter: fewer drawers, fewer knots of lights, fewer rituals kept out of duty. The house breathed, the holidays felt softer and more joyful. The first thing she let go of was small yet freeing. Be honest, do the holidays feel like a weight more than a celebration? Start with one small. 1. Old holiday decorations that drain joy. When Meryl started sorting her holiday boxes, she imagined a gentle task: a little dusting and a soft walk down memory lane. But lifting the lids felt like opening time capsules. Ornaments wrapped in yellowed paper, garlands stiff with storage, lights hopelessly tangled, and glitter that clung to everything. Each item tugged a different year forward: a child's crooked paper snowflake, a chipped ceramic angel, a plastic reindeer that had sat on the mantel for decades. At first nostalgia warmed her, then a slow heaviness settled in. She began to notice a pattern. Some decorations still sparked true delight, others felt like duty. There was a wreath she had kept since the winter her husband died. She had preserved it out of ritual rather than pleasure. Boxes labeled "for the kids" held ornaments the kids no longer recognized. A repaired nativity set had become more obligation than comfort. What had been celebration had hardened into emotional ballast. So Meryl changed the question she asked herself. Instead of asking how to keep everything safe, she asked, what honestly lifts my spirit? She laid the pieces out, touched each one, and listened. If an ornament made her smile immediately, she kept it. If it tightened her chest or pulled at guilt, she thanked it and set it aside. She filled a small box labeled "Keeps for the Heart" and made a pile for donation to a local senior center and a community swap. As the extras left, space returned to her living room and to her days. The tree, finally freed from competing tubs, stood in calm. Her evenings grew quieter, less burdened by chores, and she found time to enjoy simple moments: a carol, a cup of tea, a phone call with family. At the bottom of a bin she barely remembered, she found a small tin of folded notes from her husband, written across years. Reading them brought gratitude rather than grief. The discovery reminded her that memory survives release. It wasn't glitter or plastic that made her weep, it was the gentle return of room for joy. If you have held onto a decoration because it felt wrong to let it go, start with one small box today and notice how much lighter your holidays can feel in just days. Letting go is not forgetting, it's choosing where to place your heart: in warm moments, in laughter with loved ones, and in afternoons that are finally yours again. 2. Expired holiday foods and spices. When Meryl turned her attention to the kitchen, she expected a simple tidy-up, maybe rearrange a few cans, wipe down a shelf or two, and move on. But opening her pantry was like peering into a forgotten time capsule. Rows of dusty jars, dented tins, and fading labels stared back at her. There was cranberry sauce from 2018, a bag of flour she hadn't touched since her granddaughter's wedding shower, and cinnamon that had long surrendered its scent. The nutmeg had hardened into a single lump, and the peppermint extract smelled more like medicine than Christmas. 4 years, she'd assumed these items were harmless, just waiting for someday. But someday never came. She laughed at first, who keeps gravy mix from 2 presidents ago? But then came a quiet pause. Each item carried a memory, ingredients from recipes she once planned to make for her family, sauces she'd bought when her husband was alive because he loved cranberry on everything. Those small containers weren't just food, they were fragments of a life that had shifted without her noticing. And somewhere between the soup cans and the spice rack, Meryl realized she'd been clinging to the illusion of continuity, as if keeping those jars preserved the warmth of holidays long gone. So she made a promise to herself. If it didn't nourish, it didn't stay. Out went the expired cans, the hardened sugars, the spices that no longer sparked joy or scent. But she didn't stop there. She filled a box with unopened, still good food and took it to the local food pantry. As she sorted, her fingers brushed something thin and folded between 2 dusty tins, a small note, in her late husband's handwriting, "Bake something extra, for Mrs. Henley next door." Her eyes stung. It was such a simple line, written years ago, but it reminded her what holidays were really about: kindness, shared warmth, community. That night, Meryl cleaned every shelf until it gleamed. She replaced the old spices with fresh ones, labeling each jar with care. The next morning, she baked cranberry muffins, just like her husband used to love, and took half the batch to her new neighbor, a widower who'd just moved in. As the scent of cinnamon filled her home again, she realized her pantry no longer felt like a graveyard of good intentions. It felt alive, ready for new memories. Sometimes decluttering isn't about what you throw away, it's about what you make room for. When was the last time you looked through your pantry and thought, what part of my story is still waiting to be shared? 3. Unused holiday dishes and serving trays. When Meryl opened the cabinet above her sink, she nearly laughed out loud. Stacked neatly, yet silently judging her, were 8 large serving platters, heavy, ornate, and rarely touched. There were trays shaped like snowflakes, embossed bowls trimmed in gold, and the enormous turkey platter she hadn't used since her husband passed away. She stood there, hands on her hips, and whispered to herself, "Who exactly am I feeding?" The entire neighborhood. 4 years, those dishes had been part of her identity, the hostess, the organizer, the woman who made everyone feel welcome. Back when her children and their families filled the house, she needed every platter. But as life shifted and gatherings grew smaller, the dishes stayed right where they were, quietly taking up space. Each one carried a memory, but also a burden, the weight of who she used to be. She realized she wasn't keeping dishes, she was keeping expectations. So, Meryl began the delicate process of letting go. She took out each piece and remembered where it came from: the red rim tray she bought for her first Christmas dinner, the crystal bowl gifted by her sister who now lived across the country, the casserole dish that had survived a dozen family potlucks. Some made her smile. Others made her sigh. In the end, she decided to keep only what fit her life now: the 2 platters she actually used, and the serving bowl her granddaughter loved filling with popcorn during movie nights. The rest, she packed carefully into boxes. She didn't want them gathering dust another year. So she donated them to a local church that hosted free holiday dinners for seniors and families in need. "Now my dishes will still serve, just in another home," she said softly, sealing the final box. That single act filled her with a joy she hadn't expected, lighter yet deeply rooted in purpose. Then came the surprise. At the very back of the cabinet, she found a box labeled Christmas china. She opened it to discover a complete set she'd forgotten existed, a wedding gift, untouched for nearly 4 decades. Inside was a note from her mother, written in fading ink: "Use these, don't save them. Every day deserves a little celebration." Meryl smiled through tears, realizing the message wasn't about dishes, it was about living fully, now. So she washed one plate, brewed herself tea, and ate a cookie off it. No guests, no special occasion, just peace. How many serving pieces do you actually use during the holidays? 4. Unsent holiday cards and stationery. When Meryl opened the bottom drawer of her old writing desk, she found what looked like a paper snowstorm waiting to happen. Half-used boxes of Christmas cards, leftover envelopes, and sheets of festive stationery yellowed around the edges. Some still bore price tags from stores that no longer existed. She smiled at her own logic from years past. I'll keep these, just in case. But as she sifted through them, a wave of realization washed over her. Just in case had become a quiet museum of good intentions, years of messages never written, connections never made, and thoughts she meant to share but never found time for. She sat at her desk, surrounded by cards decorated with glittery reindeer, snowflakes, and angels, each one meant to carry a small piece of her heart to someone else. Back then, sending cards was a ritual, the crisp paper, the smell of ink, the satisfaction of sealing an envelope with care. But now, many of the names on her old address list had changed, friends who'd moved, cousins who'd passed, neighbors she hadn't spoken to in years. The truth hit her softly. It wasn't the paper that connected her to people, it was the presence. Instead of clinging to the stack of unused cards, Meryl decided to start anew. She kept 3, the ones that felt most meaningful, and recycled the rest, whispering a quiet thank you as she dropped them into the bin. The space that opened up in her drawer felt symbolic, like uncluttering a small corner of her heart. Then she brewed a cup of tea, took a deep breath, and sat down to write 3 real letters by hand, one to her granddaughter studying out of state, one to her oldest friend in Maine, and one to a former co-worker she'd lost touch with. When she slipped the envelopes into the mailbox, she didn't expect much. But a week later, one letter came back, not unopened, but answered. Inside was a photo of her and her friend at a library fundraiser from the 1980s, smiling like time hadn't touched them. It reminded her how simple gestures can reopen doors we didn't know were still there. The next day, she deleted a dozen old email drafts she'd been meaning to send and made 2 phone calls instead. Each conversation felt more genuine than any printed greeting ever could. It wasn't about perfect handwriting or matching envelopes anymore. It was about presence, sincerity, and the courage to reconnect before it's too late. Do you still send holiday cards, or have you found another way to reach the ones who matter most? 5. Gifts you bought but never gave. When Meryl began sorting through the upper shelves of her bedroom closet, she wasn't expecting to find ghosts of Christmases past, glossy gift bags still stuffed with untouched presents, some wrapped so long ago the tape had yellowed at the edges. There was a lavender-scented candle, a wool sweater 2 sizes too small, a kitchen gadget she'd bought on sale, just in case someone stops by. Each item carried a whisper of a plan that never happened, a coffee date postponed, a dinner that never came, a friendship that slowly faded. For a moment, she felt a pang of guilt. These weren't just forgotten gifts, they were fragments of time, little intentions that had lost their moment. She sat on the floor, surrounded by ribbons and tissue paper, and thought about how easily life gets cluttered not just with things, but with the weight of what's unfinished. But instead of feeling regret, she decided to turn the discovery into something good. That afternoon, she made tea, spread the gifts across her bed, and began assembling what she called blessing bags. Each one held a mix of warmth and care, the candle, a cozy scarf, some tea sachets, and a handwritten note that read, "You are thought of this season." She didn't have a list of names this time. Instead, she brought the bags to a nearby senior center and asked the staff to give them to residents who might not receive many visitors. When she returned home, she felt lighter, not because her closet was cleaner, but because those gifts finally fulfilled their purpose. The next week, she received a small thank you note in her mailbox from someone she didn't know. The handwriting trembled, but the message was clear. "I didn't think anyone remembered me this Christmas. Your gift made my day." Meryl sat quietly for a long time, tears in her eyes, realizing that sometimes, what we've held onto for too long isn't clutter, it's potential waiting to be released. Now, every December, she revisits that same shelf. If a gift has stayed too long without finding its home, it becomes part of another blessing bag. And with each one, she's reminded that generosity isn't about timing or perfection, it's about letting things go where they are needed most. Have you ever found an old gift you never gave away? 6. Clothes you save for holiday events that no longer fit. When Meryl opened the cedar chest at the foot of her bed, the faint scent of lavender sachets met her, a fragrance of nostalgia. Inside lay a neatly folded time capsule, dresses, blouses, and suits she hadn't worn in over a decade. There was the emerald green dress she wore to her husband's retirement party, a red velvet blazer from her daughter's first Christmas concert, and a silver shawl she'd once promised herself she'd wear when I lose just 5 pounds. Each piece carried a memory stitched into its seams, but not one had seen the light of day in years. At first, she felt the familiar tug of sentimentality, the quiet voice that says, maybe someday. But when she held each garment against herself in the mirror, she saw not disappointment, but change. Her body had softened, her style had evolved, and her life had shifted into something gentler. Keeping clothes that no longer fit wasn't honoring the past, it was anchoring her to a version of herself she'd already outgrown. So Meryl did something brave. She created 2 piles. In one, she placed the clothes she truly loved and still felt confident wearing. In the other, she folded the rest with care, adding tissue paper and ribbon before donating them to a local charity that helped women preparing for job interviews and community events. As she packed the donation bag, she whispered, "May these bring someone else joy." But at the very bottom of the chest, she found a dress wrapped in a faded dry cleaning bag, one she'd worn to her 25th wedding anniversary dinner. The fabric shimmered like memory itself. She sat down, tracing the neckline with her fingers, remembering how her husband had looked at her that night, eyes soft and proud. She smiled through tears and decided to keep that one. Not to wear again, but to remember the life it celebrated. By the time the chest was empty, the air in her room felt lighter. She realized that comfort isn't just about what fits your body, it's about what fits your present life. When she later stood in front of her pared-down closet, she didn't feel loss, she felt peace. Every hanger held something that reflected who she was now, not who she used to be. Do you have clothes waiting for a special occasion that never seems to come? 7. Family traditions that no longer bring peace. For years, Meryl clung to her holiday traditions like a promise. The pies, the table settings, the late-night wrapping rituals that once made her house the center of Christmas magic. Every December, she would bake 6 pies, 2 apple, 2 pumpkin, 1 pecan, and 1 sweet potato, just as her mother had. But as her children grew up and started their own families, fewer and fewer slices were eaten. The pies sat beautifully arranged but mostly untouched, and Meryl found herself scrubbing plates and packing leftovers into the freezer long after midnight. The joy she once felt had quietly turned into exhaustion. One evening, as she dusted off her recipe cards yet again, she paused. Her hands trembled slightly, not from age, but from a sudden awareness. Who am I doing this for? She thought. The kitchen, once filled with laughter and music, now felt like a place of obligation. That night, she called her daughter, Laurel, and confessed, "Honey, I don't think I can keep up with all this anymore." To her surprise, Laurel laughed softly. "Mom, we've been wanting to tell you, we'd love a simple dinner this year. We just want you rested and smiling, not tired from cooking all day." So that Christmas, Meryl did something radical. She baked just 1 pie. She set the table with mismatched plates, turned off the TV, and asked everyone to share a favorite holiday memory instead. The house wasn't spotless. The food wasn't perfect. But for the first time in years, she found herself laughing, really laughing, as stories and small confessions filled the room. The conversation stretched long into the night, and nobody noticed that the dessert table was smaller. They noticed that Meryl was present. In that moment, she realized something profound. Some traditions don't age well, but love always does. Letting go of what no longer brings peace doesn't mean abandoning the past. It means making room for new warmth, new laughter, and a quieter kind of joy. The next morning, as she sipped her coffee by the window, she whispered to herself, "This feels right." And it did. What holiday tradition feels more like a chore than joy? 8. Old electronics you might need for holiday photos or music. When Meryl opened the drawer in her guest room, she was greeted by a tangle of black cords and forgotten gadgets, old digital cameras, flip phones, and MP3 players that hadn't seen daylight since her grandkids were in grade school. There was even an ancient camcorder wrapped in a scarf, batteries long dead but memories still trapped inside the tiny tapes it once carried. Every holiday season, she told herself she'd sort through them someday, just in case she ever needed one again. But someday had quietly turned into 10 years. That morning, as carols played faintly from her smart speaker, Meryl sat on the floor surrounded by her small museum of technology. She picked up her old silver camera, the one she used to photograph every Christmas morning. When she clicked the power button, nothing happened. For a moment, she felt an unexpected pang of loss. Then she smiled, realizing the truth: those photos weren't missing. They were already living in her mind. The laughter, the messy wrapping paper, the twinkle of lights reflected in her late husband's eyes. So, she made a decision. Out went the boxes of tangled chargers, the outdated CD player, and the stack of old memory cards she could no longer open. She recycled what she could and donated the rest to a local tech repair shop that repurposed electronics for low-income seniors. But before sealing the last box, she discovered something unexpected: a small, green iPod covered in stickers. Curious, she plugged it in using an old cord that barely worked. After a few seconds of static, a familiar song burst through the tiny earbuds: "Have yourself a merry little Christmas." She laughed out loud, the sound echoing through her quiet house. It wasn't the music that moved her, it was the reminder that memories live in the moments, not the machines. That night, instead of filming every second of her holiday dinner, she left her phone on the counter. She sat beside her grandchildren, hummed along to the music, and felt fully present. The photos would fade, but the connection she felt that night would last far longer. Do you still keep old devices you think you'll use someday? 9. Holiday paperwork, receipts, and manuals. When Meryl finally opened the drawer beneath her kitchen phone stand, the one she'd avoided for years, a puff of dust and nostalgia hit her all at once. Inside were hundreds of papers layered like the rings of a tree, telling the quiet story of holidays long past, receipts from stores that no longer existed, appliance manuals for coffee makers long replaced, and yellowing instruction booklets for decorations she hadn't used since the early 2000s. There were crumpled warranty slips, half-faded shopping lists, and even a handwritten reminder from 2012 that read, "Buy lights before December." She sat on the floor, sorting each piece with gentle care, as if she might uncover a secret tucked between the pages. The longer she looked, the more she realized this wasn't organization, it was emotional archaeology. Every receipt felt like a breadcrumb leading her back through time. The year her son bought his first house, the Christmas she hosted 15 people, the winter she splurged on the fancy wreath because she deserved something pretty. Each slip of paper carried proof that she'd lived fully, but also proof of how much she had been trying to hold on. Halfway through the pile, she found a thin envelope tucked between a stack of recipe cards. Inside was a folded note, written in her late husband's familiar looping script: "Keep things simple this year." Her breath caught. He had written it the year he fell ill, the year everything slowed down. She had forgotten about the note entirely, yet here it was, waiting quietly like a whisper from the past. She set it aside, smoothing the edges with her fingertips, and felt her eyes sting. That small message changed everything. She didn't just declutter the papers, she decluttered the pressure. The receipts, manuals, and outdated guides went into the recycling bin, one after another, each release making her shoulders a little lighter. The recipe cards she loved went into a keepsake folder, organized by the memories they carried, not their ingredients. And that note? She pinned it on her refrigerator, where it would greet her every morning through the holidays. Keep things simple this year. It wasn't just advice, it became her mantra. No more rushing for perfect gifts, no more over-decorating, no more guilt over letting go. Just space for peace, laughter, and what really mattered. When was the last time you sorted through your holiday paperwork? 10. Guilt, gifts, and obligations. In the quiet corner of her living room, Meryl stood staring at a porcelain angel she displayed every December for 15 years. She didn't particularly like it. The colors were too bright, the glitter too much, but every holiday, she set it out anyway. It had been a gift from a well-meaning neighbor, and for some reason, Meryl felt obligated to keep showing it off. Next to it sat a collection of similar guilt gifts, scented candles she'd never burned, knickknacks wrapped in polite smiles, and framed photos of people she hadn't spoken to in years. It wasn't clutter, exactly, it was emotional residue. One afternoon, she asked herself a question she'd never dared before. If no one ever saw this, would I still keep it? The answer came quickly and softly, no. That simple realization felt like fresh air after a long winter. Meryl began collecting every item she owned purely out of obligation. The sweaters from relatives she never wore, the elaborate centerpiece a friend insisted she had to have, the decorative mugs that only reminded her of how much she'd been trying to please everyone else. She placed them gently into donation boxes, whispering a quiet thank you to each one for what it had represented, care, thoughtfulness, connection, before letting it go. As she worked, she realized her holidays had become a performance, shaped by years of politeness and pressure. Every decoration, every dish, every must-do tradition was an echo of someone else's expectations. So, she did something radical, she stopped. That year, Meryl chose only what felt genuinely joyful. Instead of baking 20 cookies for every neighbor, she invited 2 friends over for cocoa and conversation. Instead of decorating every inch of her house, she lit a single candle beside a photo of her husband and played their favorite carol. For the first time in decades, her December calendar wasn't bursting with obligations, it was open enough to breathe. And when the holiday finally arrived, something miraculous happened. The joy returned. No guilt, no performance, no pretending. Just peace. She sat by her window, mug in hand, watching the snow fall outside, and whispered, "This is enough." It wasn't about what she owned or displayed, it was about what she allowed herself to feel. What's one thing you do every holiday that you'd stop if you didn't feel guilty? The morning after her final round of decluttering, Meryl stood in the middle of her living room, surrounded by a kind of silence she hadn't heard in years. The hum of chaos was gone. No clutter, no guilt, no boxes waiting to be sorted. Just light through the curtains and a faint scent of cinnamon from the candle on her coffee table. For the first time in decades, her home felt like hers again, not a museum of memories or a showroom of expectations, but a living space filled only with what mattered now. She hung a single silver ornament on her tree, one she'd kept since her first Christmas with her husband. It wasn't fancy, but it shimmered softly under the lights. "I'm not decorating for others this year," she whispered. "I'm decorating for peace." And in that moment, the truth settled deep in her chest. Peace doesn't depend on perfection or approval, it begins with permission. The permission to let go. Her shelves were lighter, but her spirit was fuller. The clutter she'd carried for so long wasn't just physical, it had been emotional. The noise of what she should do had finally quieted into the calm of what she chose to do. That afternoon, she brewed tea, turned on soft jazz instead of the usual carols, and called her daughter. "We're keeping things simple this year," she said with a smile. Her daughter paused, then replied, "Mom, that sounds perfect." It was then Meryl realized peace isn't found in more, it's found in less. Every item she released was a farewell to years of guilt, duty, and expectation. Her home didn't show what she'd lost, but what she'd reclaimed: stillness, clarity, and the quiet joy of presence. If your holidays could feel lighter this year, what would you let go of first? And what Meryl learned next became a message every senior needs to hear this season. Decluttering before the holidays isn't just about shelves, it's about space in your heart. Less stuff means more serenity. The holidays stop feeling like a production and start feeling like a pause, a time to breathe, to reconnect, to be. So this year, choose simplicity as courage. Choose peace as your gift. Let your home reflect the calm you deserve, not the weight of holidays past, but the lightness of the life you're still beautifully living. Before you go, here's how to hype this video and support our wise aging seniors community. Step 1. On YouTube, scroll to the comment carousel and find the hype button. Step 2. Tap hype. Step 3. Choose your points, smaller creators get a bigger boost. Step 4. Confirm, and you're done. Each hype helps more seniors find calm, courage, and connection this season. So go ahead, tap hype, hit like, and subscribe. Because the best years aren't behind you. They're the ones you're finally clearing space to live.